screen. Now we have, for your delectation and delight, in conversation with David Reeves. David Reeves is, he works at the Woodland Trust on, he has a role relating to supporter journeys and planning strategy and all sorts of widely ranged things there. But he's here today in his capacity as chair of the Supporter Experience Group. And we're going to be chatting with David. It's going to be more of an interview conversation and asking him about really from that perspective of leading the Supporter Experience Group, finding out about his views on support journeys, challenges of delivering a great experience, measurement, and actually we'll see where it takes us. I think Roger's going to keep an eye on the chat and the Q&A. So if there's anything that crops up while we're chatting, stick your hand up, nudge Roger, and yeah, we'll open up and you can ask David yourself and his questions. And I think, I mean, I wish we could have a round of applause, but maybe you can put a little applause icon up there. But I think now we can welcome David onto the stage. Are you there, David?
Thanks, Richard. I am.
Awesome. So I think it's just you and me on screen. Yes, there we are. It works perfectly. I don't know which side you are. You're over there, aren't you? Hi, David. High five. High five.
No, that way. I need to go that way for me. There we go.
So my first question, and it's a really easy one. Hopefully you should be able to answer this one, is what makes a great supporter journey?
You say it's an easy question, Richard. I wish it was that easy. So for me, you hear the words relevant, timely, and effortless an awful lot. And I think they sum up at the essence of what a great supporter journey should be. But what I see quite a lot is that charities predetermine what relevant, timely, and effortless actually means. And so therefore it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy and defeats the object of it. And I use the analogy quite a lot at the Woodland Trust. If any of my colleagues are on today, they'll probably roll in their eyes. But the analogy of relationships and marriage, and generally speaking, in our society, there's a path that the majority of people will loosely follow. You know, first date, seeing each other, officially going out, moving in, getting married, kids, all that kind of stuff. Supporter journeys are similar in that they will have a general pattern, and what we see is that charities tend to service that general pattern and funnel all the supporters down that pattern according to their own timeline. What actually happens in reality and in society and in our supporter base is that people do those things in a different order, depending on their experiences, their culture, their beliefs. Some do it faster than others. Some people propose on the first date and get a yes. Others don't want to get married at all. And despite inherently knowing this and knowing that this happens, we continue to chase this fallacy of the perfect supporter and to try and get everyone there as quickly as possible. And in doing that, you actually alienate some of your supporters. So, and I'll give you an example. There was a study conducted in 2019, and it was about how supporters perceive the different benefits that they get from supporting charities in different ways. So one example would be, you know, let's take a supporter who predominantly takes part in things like raffles and lotteries, buying products, donating goods to store, whatever it may be. The benefits of all of these center around being easy to do. They're win-win, so they get to do something, get something back, they give something to the charity at the same time, and most importantly, they keep a low profile. So let's say that supporter then becomes a legacy pledger, and all of the research says that with legacy pledgers, you need to make them feel special and put them on a plinth. But this person has wanted a low profile the whole time they've supported you. So how does it make them feel all of a sudden being put on this plinth? Yeah. And actually, what it's a bit like what Sam was saying earlier. What you need to do is find out really what's going on underneath the surface of your results, the good and the bad, and learning from them, and finding the behavioural things, finding your watercress. You know, where's the watercress in your data, and understanding when you find that, what are you going to do as a result of when the supporter does that. So actually, rather than planning towards your own timeline and your own comms plan, actually you're planning to what the supporter is about to do, or what you hope that supporter is about to do, and trying to influence that. And I think what we'll see in the future is that charities will start operating more like an organism. They'll continually adapt, continually learn, and and have this symbiotic relationship with the supporters in the environment they're in. And that's where great supporter journeys will happen.
Wow, it wasn't a simple question or answer, was it?
No, I'm quite existential today, so I apologise to anyone. If you're all philosophers, we're in a good place.
No, that's good. That's good. And I love that you picked up on John Hurd's organic watercress, because I wrote that down, John Hurd's organic watercress, because every charity has its version, doesn't it, of John Hurd's organic watercress? But knowing what it is, it's about digging below, isn't it? That's going to be my shorthand, I think, for some time now, because the journey isn't necessarily about the sequence of steps, is it? It's about knowing what is your John Hurd's organic watercress. That's what I've said after a few times. Excellent, thank you for that. So, wow. So, if that is a supporter journey, that in a nutshell, what do you think are what makes it difficult for charities? What are the barriers? What are the challenges? What makes it difficult for charities to get to that point where they're able to execute something like that?
I think it's a battle of two halves. On one hand, with supporters, you've got lots of people with very different needs. That means that being relevant and being timely can be different for everybody, and it's hard to predict that. Even thinking about predicting that, and that makes it quite difficult. Actually, if you're asked the right questions of your data, any psychologist will tell you that people are really predictable. And part of the challenge is that we don't ask the right questions. And if we took a more social science approach to, much like what you're doing about loyalty, if we took a more social science approach to our insight and our data and asking questions about supporters, you can uncover those elements of the supporter experience that can be managed and predicted. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got all of the internal challenges. You're having to compete with silos that make collaboration difficult or full of conflict. You've got KPIs or around income that drive the wrong marketing behaviors, because if you want to increase your income, you increase your mailing size, and all of a sudden you're not thinking about, well, how do people actually receive that mailing in the process. You also then have how we use technology, and note that I'm not blaming technology, I'm blaming how we use technology, because that's more the problem than the actual technology itself. And I'm sure Sam, working at Salesforce, will probably agree with that. And then kind of along within that, you've then got all your structures and your processes that are a hangover from what we used to believe is good business practice, based on Henry Ford and his production line, where each team has an individual skill or focus. And ultimately, supporter experience can't be the responsibility of one person or one team. It has to be everyone, and everyone has to understand how all these things knit together internally and how they reflect the supporter experience. What you've heard today from both the Sarahs and Stuart at Leprosy Mission and CR UK is actually it's that evolution towards that utopia of an entire organisation being in tune with their supporters. But it starts with one person. It starts with the Sarahs of the world that are trying to encourage that to happen within their organisation. And there's other examples of this. One that resonated with me last year was RNLI, who have something called, I think it was called the Feedback Squad. And at the Woodland Trust, we have the Audience Owners Group. They're all the same kind of iteration of the same thing. And that's where we need to get to. That's where our biggest challenges exist.
So I'm not getting off script here, because there isn't a script, but we're not there yet, are we? As a sector, we aren't. So, I think that there's a broad understanding that what the kind of the picture that you've painted, I don't think anybody would argue with it or disagree with it or not recognise it. So what can we do to kind of get there more quickly?
I think
we just need more Sarahs and Stuarts.
Yeah, well, you do, and that's the thing. No matter how good the technology is, no matter how you're structured, it's all about truly understanding what supporter experience is and what it means to your organisation. And it starts with individuals. It starts with, Sarah said it earlier, who's championing your supporter. Find your advocates, find the people internally who can articulate why it's important, and create those quick wins. So, prove your point, use examples of other organizations, don't lose sight of the real issues. But Sarah's examples from CR UK earlier about the things that they were doing and trying that comms plan, that changing the proportions of thanking and asking over a period of time. All of those are about trying to demonstrate the value of it and create those wins. And another thing that resonated with me from the other Sarah was actually, whenever someone is not on board with that, use the phrase, well, let's test that assumption. because it's neutral, it's not offensive, it's not going to upset anyone, and actually it proves a point. Either way, one of you could win, but everyone wins in the end. And it takes time. It takes time to generate traction, but eventually that change will stick. And the other thing I would say is when you do see and hear these case examples, drill into what's happening underneath them. How are they structured? What's their culture like? How are they being empowered to do that thing that they've just done? Because that's where the magic is. That's the thing that will change your organization and help eventually change the sector as well.
And change the world.
Well, yeah, isn't that why we're all here?
Yeah. So change something I believe, and I'm pretty sure Roger believes as well, and maybe some here who believe it, but to change something, you've got to kind of know, you've got to be able to have a start and you've got to have an as is and a to be, don't you? You have to have a start and an end point, and that involves some kind of measurement. It could be qualitative, it could be quantitative, but actually in order to get from A to B, you need to know where A is and know where B is. So so going back to supporter experience, how important is it to be able to sort of measure that supporter experience, and we've seen some ways today, but from your perspective, what ways are kind of effective today, and where should we be looking going forwards?
Yeah, so I think there's two parts to your question. I think the first one is easy to answer. Is it important? Absolutely. Right now, it's incredibly important. I think in the future it'll be less so important when we exist as an organism and we're totally connected to our supporters. It will be less important at that point. But right now, it's the only way that you can articulate the need for change in a tangible way and demonstrate that need for change. So I think it's really important. And from my own experience, analogies about marriage will only get you so far. But it's a start. It gets you there. As for the second part of your question, how do you measure something that can be or feel so intangible and feel so different for every supporter? A good experience for a volunteer will be different to a good experience for a donor, and that will be different again to a good experience for a shop customer. And then what happens if I'm all three? Like, your mind just blows. Each of these supporters, they may then expect something different from a charity that's battling cancer versus one that's supporting disadvantaged young people, or is an international relief charity. Then on top of that, you need to layer in the relationship elements. What's good for a new supporter will be different to what's good for an existing loyal long-term supporter. And what we're trying to do as a committee actually is trying to provide some clarity over that. And it will take some time. It takes a lot of time to try and drill into all these questions, but it's not particularly useful for anyone here this afternoon. So I'm going to share something that, Richard, you might know is something fairly familiar. So this is something that we put together as a committee, and Richard and I did a talk on this some time ago. Actually, it was quite well received, and it just really demonstrates that there's different things that different measures can offer you, and you can see a variety of them here. The Chase Index is there on the right, which is about loyalties products. We talked about Net Promoter Score in the middle. There's lots of the ways that you can measure the supporter experience, and they all give you very different things. Ultimately, whatever you measure, it's going to be fraught with bias. It's going to be inaccurate. It's going to have outliers. Sarah referred to it earlier about her little tick boxes in the emails. Only certain people are going to give you those thumbs up and thumbs down, because it's only going to be the people that have the interest to scroll to the bottom of those emails. You're actually missing a lot of valuable information. So the trick is to get a variety of these measures that cover all the bases, and really try and understand them in context of each other. So can you track a individual supporter across multiple metrics? And if you can, that's where you can see what's really happening and what's really going on. But most importantly, it's about being critical and objective in your analysis of it. Don't use the data to confirm what you already know. Use it to test assumptions, use it to test hypotheses, and combine that, if you can, with other sources of information like behavioural science from academics and other reliable sources, and test those assumptions at every chance you get. That would be my advice.
Thank you. I was an unexpected treat getting a picture from you. If you imagine you're back at the Supporter Experience Group Committee, and someone from a charity calls up the committee and says, "Hey, supporter experience group committee, can you help us become measure the supporter experience, become more supporter focused, whatever the things are. How do we can you give us some hints and tips? What would your top tips be for a charity looking to kind of take those steps towards being more focused on the supporter experience?"
Yeah, I think I touched a bit on them earlier about finding your advocates, creating those quick wins, demonstrating all of those elements that really mean that show that focusing on support experience is really important. I'd also say start at the top. My own journey in doing this at the Woodland Trust was very much that I started at the bottom, and maybe and it's great that you can generate that traction from the bottom of the pyramid and within on the coalface. That's ultimately where the work gets done. But if you can influence right at the top, go to the top of the organisation and get them talking about it, because that's what makes things a lot easier as you kind of go through the process. And use your, lean on your peers in the sector to try and demonstrate what they're doing and what they're learning. The Cancer Research UKs of the world, the leprosy missions of the world, the RNLIs of the world, the Children's Society, Save the Children. They're all doing some amazing things. So bring them to life in your own organisation as well.
Excellent. I think I have one more question here, which is, if you had a magic wand and you could make one change sort of across the sector for charities to make it easier for them to deliver the most amazing support experiences and grow supporter loyalty, what would that change be? And you don't have to be limited to one.
Good question. I think it would be really easy to wave a magic wand and say, I'm going to fix your structure and I'm going to fix your KPIs. I'm going to give everyone better technology. But there's no fun in that. And actually, if I fix your structure today, your environment for your supporters might change in 10 years. So all of a sudden that structure's out of date. And same with the technology. We will probably be doing this on what are they called? Holograms one day, not Zoom.
Metaverse. We'll be doing it in the metaverse with our Facebook goggles on. Yeah,
we'll be talking to Mark Zuckerberg instead of me. But so, and also, we know that technology, it's not necessarily the technology, it's a problem, it's the people. So my choice is something I think much more fundamental and much more philosophical, as I said at the start of this. And it's to remind every person in every charity every day, there's only two reasons we go to work. The first one is to solve a problem in our society that your charity are experts at. And if you forget that purpose in pursuit of bigger pots of money, your supporters will know that. They will know when you've blurred the edges of why you exist. So think back to that RNLI example earlier that Roger talked about. RNLI was like steadfast on why they existed, and they were clear that if you were a supporter and that bothered you, they're not really that interested in you being a supporter. And it's that kind of thing that we need to connect to. The second one is to focus on that space where your supported needs meet your ability to solve the problem they want to solve. And the magic about this one is it's their problem and you're the solution. And think again, everything else out of that is a distraction. And thinking about Cancer Research UK, their response to support COVID research, the fact that coronavirus and the treatment of cancer patients in the current situation is a big concern about them. Actually, what they've done is pivoted and changed as a direct response to meet that need, because they recognise that overlap. And so those two things, I think, if we wake up every morning before we go to work and we're reminded of those two things, change will organically happen. And you'll get the right technology, and you'll get the right structure, and you'll get the right KPIs. And I don't need to fix them for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. I think we're going to move. I think we're definitely going to move to questions, but I think we've been privileged with Roger's stepping in first. So excellent. Well, thank you, David, and Roger.
So I was just picking up on questions, really.
Yeah.
I'm going to paraphrase this slightly. The word silos is one we hear far too much in our sector, and I've heard you talk about that as well. Do you have any advice for people where they are in a siloed, what do I say, a siloed organisation and overcoming that?
I think it's about enforcing collaboration in everything that you do. So you need to behave how you want everyone else to behave. So if you're going out and you're wanting to do an appeal or an individual giving campaign, whatever it may be, don't do it in your own space. Actually go out to other people and talk about how is it that we can work together to deliver a campaign that might deliver for more for our supporters, and doing it that way. And I take a practical example that we do at the Woodland Trust. We always attach our site acquisition. So when we're buying new land to plant trees on, we always attach it to an appeal. And I say, well, why can't we make it a membership thing? Why can't we make it a loyalty thing and an engagement thing? It's not just about generating money. It has all of these wealth of other things involved in it. And that only comes down to someone being proactive about reaching out to other parts of the organization. And as soon as you start doing that, other people go, well, that looks like quite a good idea. It might feel really, really difficult to start with, because it's more work, it's more meetings, it's more people that you've got to manage. But the end result of it is better for you, it's better for them, and it's better for your supporter.
Thank you. You also talked about how so often this starts with one person. One person can be that catalyst. And I suspect we've got people on here now who feel like they might be that one person in their organisation. It can sometimes feel lonely. It can sometimes feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall. Yeah. You gave some tips earlier on, so sort of more general ones. Are there anything specifically, if you are, that you put out? Because maybe you were that one person at Woodland Trust going back a few years ago. I don't know. Maybe there was a bit of a sort of an open door already there. But yeah, if you're that one person,
I think you have a lot of support that you might not know about. There's people on this call that are probably in that space. Everyone that we engage with on the Supporter Experience Committee and all the events that we do, the webinars, they're all spaces where you can come and have those conversations, and you can help with your resilience, because it is challenging, it is hard work to change something that's been done the same way for 100 years. So my advice is actually to reach out to the people that are doing this. A prime example, when I first heard about what they were doing at Cancer Research UK, I had a couple of meetings with Sarah just to go, right, let's get into this. And equally the same with Save the Children, the Children's Society. When I see what they're doing, I go and have a conversation with them and share that learning. And I think that's really, really important, because then when you go back into your organisation and someone goes, well, why should I do this? You can go, well, actually, the Children's Society have already done all this stuff, and this is the results that they're seeing. Why don't we go and have a conversation with them? You can then make them an advocate. You can make them part of that journey with you. So yeah, don't think outside of your box. Think outside of your organisation and reach out to other people.
That's so important, because one of the exciting things of what we're talking about here is it's quite new. It's new for us as a sector. It's new for many of us in terms of the organisations we're in, and that means we're trying new things. We're learning new things. I'm a great believer that if we get this right, we all win. This isn't a zero-sum game that we all win by getting that right. And I think that sharing and is so important here. David, I'd like to give you an opportunity to do a shameless plug for the Supporter Experience Group. You've recently taken over leading that. What are your goals for it? And go on, be absolutely shameless for this group, and why everyone on this call should join you.
So I think in the grand scheme of things, the Support Experience Committee is still quite young. My ambition is that whenever anyone thinks supporter experience, they go to that committee. So I want us to be the people that are leading all the conversations, all the major conversations around supporter experience, and being that place for thought leadership, but also that place where people can come and learn from each other, learn each other's case studies, learn from the people that are going through this with us. Because I would probably say there isn't a charity out there that has nailed this, and so therefore there isn't an expert. We're all having to be experts together, and so that's what I think that group is for. It's about connecting all of those stories and helping us learn and shape from each other. In the future, I think it'll be the place to go for supporter experience, definitely.
Great. And there is a question here saying how do people get involved? So
easiest thing is CIOF supporter experience. Google it, get on the website. There's different ways that you can get involved. We're always looking for case studies. So if you've got something that you want to share that you've done, or you want to learn from other people, come and have a chat with us, and we'll look at how we can get that into one of our events. Look on our website. There's events on there as well. We've got loads coming up next year. And there's a few voluntary positions open. So if you do have a bit of extra time to commit, join myself, join Richard, and there's a few of us on the webinar as well. Come along and join the committee and get stuck in. Yeah, please do.
Excellent. It would have been a great point to wrap up, but we have another question. So this was from Peter Cashman. You highlighted that supporters' needs are many and varied. With limited tools resources, how do you go about picking out which needs to meet in the design of supporter journeys, particularly where the value is future potential rather than already proven?
There was a little break up in the middle of that, Richard, just after you said picking out needs. Well, could you repeat it for me?
How do you go about picking out which needs to meet in the design of supporter journeys?
I think that's a $1 million question. It goes back to having those focus groups, having those surveys, having a look at finding out what's important, and actually if you've already got supporters that are your best supporters, looking at it, thinking about what Sam said about that path to the best supporter, try and identify what's different about them to the rest of your supporter base, and understand where their needs are and how they're different from other supporters. Because what you might find actually is that you could find that the needs of your best supporters are very different to the needs of your mass supporters, and you might actually switch your strategy. And you might go, what happens if I focus on this bulk and get, because there's a more common need in that bulk of people than there is in the more valuable people at that point. So I just think it's about listening to what your supporters have got to say, experimenting, having some of that longer term view. It's not just about what you're doing by each activity. It's looking longer term and just learning over time.
I'd also like to offer an answer, if I may, David.
Go for it.
So I think if you're picking out which needs to meet, I would go back to what Roger was saying earlier, and I would say this, wouldn't I? But if you're thinking about meeting a need to reflect their commitment, to grow commitment, satisfaction, and trust, those 3 drivers of loyalty, I think that's a really, really good place to start. So, I mean, yes, supporters' needs are many and varied, and actually, as Roger talked about as well, that commitment can mean different things. But if you understand what commitment means for your charity and make sure that those needs are met, the core satisfaction and those core trust needs, that's got to be the platform and the starting point, I think. So yeah, I would say no more than that.